Hello students, we are dealing with historical development of geographical thought. In that we are studying what is the contribution given by Greek scholars in the development of geographical thought. In that, in the previous session, we have dealt with what is the contribution of Greek scholars in the development of geographical thought. After that, we have seen the characteristics of the Greeks. Then also we have seen what contribution has been given by some of the important Greek scholars like Homer, Thales, Anaximander and Hipparchus. Now in today's session we will see the contribution given by another very important Greek scholars like Herodotus, Alexander the Great, Eratosthenes, Hipparchus and Posidonius. So let us see the contribution of Herodotus. The period of Herodotus was from 485 to 425 BC. Herodotus is well known as father of history. He was the first historian of the world. However, he has given great contribution in the development of geographical thought. He described historical events on the background of geographical setting. He was the strong supporter of the idea that all history must be treated geographically and all geography must be treated historically. He was a great traveler and he wrote his observations about the region he visited after personal visits and study. He visited many remote parts away from Greece and wrote about the rivers, mountains, people and culture of the places. He visited Italy, Turkey and Asia Minor, that is coastal Turkey, Israel and Lebanon. He also traveled to many islands of the Aegean Sea. His observations of the coastal parts around Greece was quite reliable and true. He also traveled many times to Egypt and also visited Libya. Herodotus was the first scholar who divided the world into three continents, that is Europe, Asia and Libya, that is Africa. He considered the size of Europe equivalent to the combined size of Asia and Libya. However, his knowledge about these continents was scanty. He described Easter, that is Danube river, as the greatest river of the world, and the Capris and Alpes as its two major tributaries. His knowledge about Europe was fairly good. He also described the courses of river Dniester and Danube as well as river Don. Herodotus' knowledge of Asia was confined mainly to the Persian Empire, which sprawled over the whole of Western Africa. He also knew the 20 administrative regions of Persian Empire, but he was not aware of great chains of mountains of Asia, particularly the Himalaya. He was not having any idea of the eastern limit of Asia and the existence of the sea to its east. Herodotus also had enormous information about the Africa continent. His knowledge about the Mediterranean coastline of Africa was very good. However, about the Central and Southern Africa, his knowledge was very limited. He divided the interior parts of Africa into three latitudinal zones. And also he described briefly the Sahara Desert and oases in the desert. Herodotus has given an account of the seas, rivers and cultural information of the people lived in different parts of the then world. He has given very reliable information about the Mediterranean, the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. He is the first scholar who declared the Caspian Sea as an inland sea. He described some of the great rivers in his writings. He opined that the Danube is the greatest river of the world. Though his knowledge about the great Nile was limited, he was well aware about the process of delta formation of the Nile, and he has also explained depositional processes of the river. About Indian rivers, he had some misconceptions. For example, he does not know the fertile Gangetic plains and considered river Indus of as it is flowing in west to east direction. Herodotus was basically a historian, therefore he has described cultural information about the inhabitants in different parts of the then world. He has given an account of the people, their clothing, ornaments, physical characteristics, food and occupations of different groups of people in Mediterranean region, Africa and Asia. About some fundamental geographic concepts, his views were wrong. For example, he, like his earlier scholars, also thought that the earth was a flat disk over which the sun traveled from east to west. He believed that the sun moved southward in winter because of the wind. However, he was the first scholar who tried to draw a meridian on the world map. Therefore, in spite of very limited resources and communication disadvantages, Herodotus has given a great contribution in the development of geographical thought. After Herodotus, let us see the contribution of Alexander the Great. The period of Alexander the Great was from 356 to 323 BC. Alexander the Great was the pupil of the great philosopher Aristotle, who believed in the knowledge acquired by direct observation. Alexander the Great was one of his outstanding and adventurous pupils. He was the king of Macedonia, that is northern Greece, and he desired to establish Greek rule all over the world. To accomplish his desire, he marched towards east with his well-trained and disciplined army. Besides expansion of his empire, Alexander also had an objective to determine the outer limits of the world, and therefore his expedition may be termed as an armed exploration. Alexander was military commander and an administrator, not geographer. However, his visionary policies to explore new dimensions of knowledge helped in the development of geographical knowledge. His armed expeditions around the Mediterranean regions in Turkey, Iran, and Egypt, as well as his visits to the Caspian Sea regions, helped the scholars to observe the new regions and collect the geographical information. He also visited the deserts of Libya. In Egypt, he founded the city Alexandria, which in latter years became a great intellectual and commercial center. Alexander also visited India, that is Punjab region, crossing Hindu Kush through Khyber Pass. Before Alexander, the knowledge of Greeks about Asia and India was very limited and vague. The expeditions of Alexander in different regions, systematic records kept by his officers made Greeks familiar about the physical features, climate, human culture, flora and fauna of Asia and regions mainly around the Mediterranean Sea. After Alexander, let us see the contribution given by Eratosthenes in the development of geography and different branches of geography. The period of Eratosthenes was from 276 to 194 BC. Eratosthenes was a chief librarian of famous Library Museum of Alexandria. During his tenure, he wrote several scientific books. Eratosthenes is mainly known for his experiments to measure the length of the equator and circumference of the earth. To measure the circumference of the earth, he made observations of the positions of the sun on solstice at two different places, as well as he also measured the angles of the sun rays. He used a very primary instrument, gnomon, for these experiments. Eratosthenes concluded that the circumference of the earth was about 25,000 miles, which is very close to the accurate length, that is 24,860 miles. He also measured the length of an equator. He also developed the system of coordinates for the world, that is latitudes and longitudes. Using the network of latitudes and longitudes, he constructed the first map of the world based on scientific principles. So, the major contribution of Eratosthenes is to develop system of coordinates, that is latitudes and longitudes, construction of the first map of the world on very scientific principles, and he also tried to measure circumference of the earth as well as an equator very precisely. Then about the shape and size as well as the sphericity of the earth, Eratosthenes concluded that the earth is a perfect sphere and placed in the center of the universe. The sun and the moon, as he stated, had independent motions. Eratosthenes also tried to measure the distances of the sun and moon from the earth, but these measurements are not correct. Using gnomon, he also attempted to determine different latitudes and longitudes. Due to his great contribution in the measurement of various geometrical aspects of the earth, Eratosthenes has been called as founder of geodesy. About the spread of the world, he opined that west to east it is more pronounced than north to south. He stated that the habitable world sprawl from Thule, that is Greenland, to Taprobane, that is Sri Lanka, and from Atlantic Ocean to Bay of Bengal. He also had some idea about India. He imagined that the shape of India as a rhombus, which is of course incorrect. He also had good knowledge about the Red Sea, Mediterranean Sea, River Nile, and some other rivers of Europe. He also knew that the Africa continent was surrounded by the ocean. He has shown the Caspian Sea as an arm of the Northern Sea. Eratosthenes described the inhabited world, that is ecumeny. This term is very important. Ecumeny means the inhabited world. In his book, he has shown the major divisions of inhabited world as Europe, Asia, and Libya, that is Africa. He also described 5 major climatic divisions of the world, or 5 major zones of the world, as a torrid zone, that is one, then 2 temperate zones and 2 frigid zones. So 1 torrid zone, 2 temperate zones and 2 frigid zones. In this way, he has described 5 major climatic zones of the world for the first time. Thus, the work done by Eratosthenes in the field of mathematical geography, cartography, and physical geography, as well as some work he has done in climatology, is remarkable and scientific. After Eratosthenes, let us see the contribution given by Hipparchus. Hipparchus was a Greek astronomer and mathematician. He discovered the precision of the equinoxes and calculated the length of the year. He was a great astronomer and compiled the first known star catalogue. After Eratosthenes, Hipparchus was appointed as the chief librarian of famous library museum, Alexandria. In his star catalogue, he listed about 850 stars. He categorized the stars into different 6 categories on the basis of their apparent brightness. This system of categorization of stars is still practiced in the modern astronomy. This is very important. Hipparchus used mathematical principles to determine the locations of the places on the earth. For that, he used the coordinates of latitudes and meridians of longitudes. He made a remarkable development in the field of scientific cartography. On the basis of latitudes, he divided the world into climata, that is the zones. For the determination of the latitudes and longitudes, he invented an instrument known as astrolabe. A noticeable contribution of Hipparchus in geometry is he was the first to divide the circle into 360 degrees. He also pointed out that the equator is a great circle and all meridians are also the great circles. Another very important work done by Hipparchus is he devised two kinds of projections so that the curved sphere of the earth can be converted into the plane surface. He designed two important projections, that is orthographic and stereographic projections, which presents only one hemisphere of the earth. Thus, the credit to convert 3D sphere of the earth into a 2D plane surface goes to Hipparchus. After that, another important Greek scholar who contributed in the fields of geography was Posidonius. Posidonius was an important Greek historian as well as geographer. He attempted to calculate the circumference of the earth, but his value was incorrect. But his value, though the value of circumference was incorrect, but his experiments are acclaimed by the geographers. He also gave the extent of habitable world, that is ecumeny, from Western Europe to India. This estimation also proved wrong. However, he strongly believed that the equatorial region is habitable. Before him, the scientific community thought that equatorial region is not habitable, but he has proved that the equatorial region is also habitable. This work of Posidonius not given credit actually. He also declared that the highest temperature and driest deserts of the world are not located on the earth, they are not located on the equator but in the temperate zones. He pointed out that the sun passes longest near the tropics and shortest time overhead the equator. He also designed orthographic and stereographic projections. Posidonius also studied the ocean tides and gave the scientific explanation of the highest tide, that is spring tide, and the lowest tide, that is the neap tide. He also wrote a book entitled The Ocean. So, this is the contribution of some of the very important Greek scholars in the field of especially mathematical geography, physical geography, climatology, as well as in oceanography.